Folks, I'm all that stands between you and a cocktail party, so give me a chance to quickly finish. I only have, is this on all the way?
Yeah.
I only have 10 minutes. I guess the thought of the organizers of this conference was that I couldn't fill more than 10 minutes, or wait and see, maybe I can, or alternatively that I could summarize everything of substance that was said in the last 2 days in about 5 minutes, spend the rest of my time congratulating the organizers for their hard work in running this conference. I'm going to allocate my time slightly differently. Over the last 2 days, we've heard two major themes: the changes in Delaware law and the Delaware legislation that sort of preempted the Moelis decision. And we've heard basically today of the impact of the Trump election and how everything now is probably up for grabs in both antitrust law, securities law, and elsewhere, and everyone has their predictions about what might happen. On the Delaware decisions, I want to say only one thing, but I hope all of the Delaware practitioners in this room go back to Delaware and try to convince their legislature that they can't do this every year. They would destroy the place if we have these kind of destabilizing statutes. And remember, this was a statute passed based on an arguably overbroad decision of a vice chancellor. My experience is that Delaware Supreme Court is capable of curtailing overbroad decisions of vice chancellors, and has done that more than once. Okay, and some of the people in the room painfully know that the Delaware Supreme Court can reverse what they say. Now, so much for that. With respect to all the changes in federal law that are coming, well, they're coming, and it's all going to be predictive and speculative. But again, the election of Donald Trump is another one of those once-in-a-millennium events that's not going to happen every year, or again, the republic is threatened. All right, now, what do I think is worth talking about? We haven't talked much about changes in what I think is the most important development in American corporate governance over the last 20 or 30 years. And that is the extreme concentration in shareholder ownership. Now 20 to 25 institutions probably will own an absolute majority of the stock, and the top 3 or 4 will probably own something like 20%, the largest shareholders. That is a new world which is totally different than the old world of dispersed shareholders that supported the Berle means thesis that shareholders basically were irrelevant, that management ran the corporation, etc. We now have extreme concentration, and it's changed every year. Most of you may not be aware. I think we had Mr. Fradkin, who knows this stuff very well, tell us that large index investors owned about 20%. If you will look at the Journal of Financial Economics, published this year, you'll find that the ownership of the indexed investors in the average American public corporation is now over 35%. That is a huge number, and it means that the world of remote shareholders who are rationally apathetic is long gone. Okay, now against that backdrop, I want to talk about how this is beginning to affect real-world transactions. And here I want to use as my brief stalking horse the recent campaign by Elliott Management to take over Southwest Airlines. As you probably know, I don't think I'm overstating, Elliott Management is maybe the hardest edge, hardball, some would say well-funded, and some would say a bit of a bully. Okay, they went after Southwest, and Southwest, frankly, never recovered from COVID-19 pandemic, and are still lagging the market and lagging their rival firms. Okay, so they were a natural target for shareholder activism. But what happened? This was not the typical case. Always aggressive, Elliott took an 11% position in Southwest, called a shareholders meeting for December 10th, which is only days away, at which they were planning to elect on a special meeting of shareholders 10 of the 15 directors who were up for election. There's a 15-person board, and some of you are lawyers and don't do well at mathematics, but 10 out of 15 is a strong majority. Okay, now, therefore, they were going for complete control. Nor was Elliott very eager to negotiate. They seemed to plan a blitzkrieg strategy. Walk in, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, and take over, all right? Now, all this is atypical in terms of the usual pattern and pace of a control battle by shareholder activists. It's unusual in three different ways. One, most activist funds buy well less than 10% of the stock. They want to go just over 5%, where they're required to sort of give everybody their battle plans. Okay? Now that's, and they also don't want to go to 10% because that triggers 16B as well as being very expensive. I won't define 16B. We don't have time for that, folks. Trust me, 16B is relevant here. Okay. B, activists usually negotiate because they want to avoid a costly proxy fight. Once you're into a proxy fight, you budgeted $5 million, but it quickly becomes 10. It can go that high and higher easily. All right. And last, you want to avoid a proxy fight because it's uncertain. But the last point, activists seldom seek majority control at the outset. They seek to get 2, 3, maybe even 4 directors appointed. We just saw that with CVS. CVS is also a very troubled company because they got a very unhappy insurance company that they mistakenly bought. And with that problem, they have had one other different insurgent came in and did get 4 directors appointed with a minimum of fuss, and it seems to have achieved what the shareholder activists wanted. Now, why did Elliott Management take this different blitzkrieg approach? Well, there are multiple answers, but notice they didn't really succeed. They didn't get what they wanted. Instead, they found that they were able to get 4 directors elected, not the 10 they wanted, but 4 not getting control. They did not get the CEO tossed out. He remains in place. He also had a very successful quarter. He managed to manipulate that just very, very timely. And they have not done several other things that you would normally, well, they did other things that were atypical. Okay. Why were they unsuccessful? Somebody stood up and resisted. Who stood up and resisted? Quietly behind the scenes, I expect that indexed investors stood up. You're all aware of the big 3. The big 3 may own in some companies up to 20%. But I just told you the Journal of Financial Economics says the average level is now 35%. 35% is 3 times what Elliott bought when they bought 11%. So there is a big boy on the block who can exercise some control. This is what I think academics should be studying. They should be focusing more on what the actual relationship is between these 2 different classes of shareholders. Shareholders who are aligned with activist investors, and we know they have been the straw that has stirred the drink for the last couple of years or decade or so. But there is one powerful force that can hold them in check, and that's the index investors. And that's what I think is not getting adequate study right now in the world of academia. Okay, now, as I told you what happened to the Elliott campaign is they got 4 seats, they got the chairman of the board thrown out, but not the CEO. Okay. How come their blitzkrieg strategy failed, and what specifically might have happened? Well, I think the big problem for a blitzkrieg-oriented activist hedge fund is they do not understand how much shareholders do not want to give actual voting control, majority control on the board to one shareholder. Giving one shareholder 10 out of 15 directors makes it possible for that one shareholder, dare I use economists' favorite word, makes it possible for them to obtain private benefits of control. 2/3 of the board is a very strong block. Maybe they could take the company. You would think of shareholder activists as an insurgent who achieves a new consensus. But if you get 2/3 of the board, you're in the same position as an Ivan Boesky or someone else who's gotten control. You are able to auction the company off, engage in private transactions that may or may not produce private benefits of control. So I think there's a good reason why our superego in the corporation today, the indexed investors, does not want to see control go in that fashion. That's what I think we should be focusing on for the future. Now, I can give you other reasons, but I'm going to say right now, on a value-weighted basis, institutions own 73.7% of the U.S. corporation. 73.7. But it's simplistic simply to say that power has shifted entirely to shareholders writ large. What you're missing is that shareholders subdivide into the indexed investor and the activist investor. the active investor puts together its wolf pack. It's a powerful force, but always there are the permanent shareholders, and the permanent shareholders are the big three plus the others that bring this number up to 35%. Bottom line, because I'm going to keep this within my 10 minutes, the tensions among different categories of institutional investors deserves much more attention than is receiving. We can all teach this world of shareholder power at the simple primer level. The primer level, you say, they all want to maximize shareholder value, so they'll get along and agree. That is not how they act with respect to each other. I think we have a more Tolstoyan world in which there are deep grudges, deep relationships, many factors, many idiosyncratic factors affecting the outcome, and the world of study of these different classes of shareholders needs to have a somewhat wider, deeper perspective. On that note, I have now exceeded my time limit by 30 seconds. Okay, so I did fill 10 minutes.
All right, on that Tolstoyan note, I guess Professor Coffey's laid out a bunch of problems. We can all decide to go whine about them, or actually we can literally go whine about them with a slightly different spelling. If you want to make your way to the other room across the hall, we have a little social hour that'll last for an hour and 20 minutes. So whine all you want. Thanks a lot for coming. Thanks again for the organizers. Appreciate it.